In the late 1980s to early 1990s, Kim Basinger was pretty much unstoppable. She was one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood, headlining blockbusters, hitting magazine covers, and pulling in millions of dollars. She had money, fame, and in this moment, right in the middle of her rise to the top of stardom, she did something kind of strange. She bought a town. Kim didn't buy a mansion. She didn't buy a big ranch like a lot of celebrities did. She literally bought an entire town. The town was called Braselton, Georgia. It came with 1,751 acres, and what she planned to do with that town was about as ambitious as you can get. Kim wanted to build a creative empire in the middle of rural Georgia with film studios, music festivals. She wanted to create a haven for artists, and maybe, just maybe, she would make a ton of money in the process.
Ever since Kim Basinger bought Braselton, people have been anxious to see what would happen next and just when their high-profile landlady might come to town. Well, they got that visit today, but it looks like the answers about Braselton's future will still be a while in coming.
What started as a dream turned into one of the most bizarre and expensive missteps in celebrity real estate history. It involved bankruptcy, lawsuits, some angry locals, and years later, it would quietly help inspire one of the funniest TV shows of the last decade. This is the story of how Kim Basinger bought a town in the 1990s and the unexpected chain of events that followed. Okay, so let's rewind the clock a little bit. It's the late 1980s, and Kim Basinger is becoming one of the most known women in Hollywood. She starts out as a model in New York. She gets her big break in television, and then by the time she's in her early 30s, she's a full-blown movie star. We're talking roles in a bunch of movies, including Batman, which was at the time one of the biggest box office hits of the decade. At this point, Kim Basinger isn't just famous. She's like famous. She's making millions. Her name's everywhere. She's in the tabloids. And like a lot of celebrities who suddenly come into huge wealth, Kim starts to look for ways to invest. You know, you've got the usual stuff, houses, endorsements, luxury, everything. But she wants to do something a little bit different, something that ties her back to her roots. See, Kim's from Georgia originally. She's born and raised in Athens. So when she starts looking around for investment ideas, she's naturally drawn back home. It was at this point when someone pitches her the idea to buy a town, like not just a piece of land, an entire town. Like I said, with Kim having roots in Georgia, naturally this town was located in Georgia. The town was called Braselton. It's just a tiny little dot on the map, about 50 miles northeast of Atlanta. When I say tiny, I mean tiny. Back in 1989, the population was hovering around 500 people, but it did have everything you'd expect to see in an old town. Braselton had a bank, a small industrial park, a handful of mom and pop shops, a post office. Kim didn't see this as just some sleepy old town. She saw potential here. At the time, Braselton was largely undeveloped. It had a lot of land, plenty of highway frontage, and just enough infrastructure to make development possible. It wasn't thriving, but it also wasn't exactly dead either. It looked like a town that had a ton of potential, and to the right person, it kind of looked like a blank canvas. The deal itself was massive. Kim and a small group of investors, including some family members, purchased roughly 1,751 acres of land in and around Braselton, and they paid a whopping $20 million for it. An incredible amount of money, especially for the 1980s. The vision here seemed pretty clear at the start. Kim wasn't trying to just buy herself a quirky vanity project. This was, at least in her mind at the time, a real business play.
Many of Braselton's 500 residents have been waiting a long time for Kim to come and tell them what she plans to do with the town she bought more than a year ago. Something the Wall Street Journal wondered too in a recent article.
She talked openly about wanting to bring jobs to the area. It would be a town that could attract musicians, filmmakers, writers, creatives of all kinds. There was talks about opening up a production studio, a film school, maybe even a theme park. It wasn't exactly all mapped out yet, but the vibe was clear here. Like, this was supposed to be a new kind of town that was built around creativity. In interviews at the time, Kim sounded passionate. You could tell that this wasn't just some investment for her. She saw it as a legacy move, something that could give back to her home state and then also be profitable at the same time. But this is where the wheels start to wobble a little bit, because having passion and vision is nice, but let's be honest, Passion doesn't build towns, money does, and so does infrastructure and planning and experience. And unfortunately, let's face it, Kim didn't have much of that. I mean, she was an actress, and acting was definitely her area of expertise. It became pretty quickly apparent that buying Braselton was the easy part, but figuring out what to actually do with it, that's where things started to unravel. From all accounts that I could find, there wasn't even a detailed business plan. Like, Kim had some ideas, but there was no timeline, no roadmap, and no real team in place to execute that plan that didn't even exist. Another thing, too, that's interesting to remember is that this was a time that was before the internet. So back then, you had to do things the old-fashioned way, and you had to get out there and network with people and meet investors and pitch your plans and brainstorm with a bunch of other like-minded individuals, which was a lot harder to do back then than it is nowadays. Anyways, Braselton locals weren't exactly thrilled by what was happening or what wasn't happening. A lot of them were actually skeptical. They liked their quiet town. They weren't looking for it to turn into some Hollywood playground.
Everybody seems to be kind of disappointed right now because they thought when she bought this thing, they'd do something with it right away, I reckon.
With no visible progress, no construction, no job creation, nothing concrete, the public started to get a bit sketched out by the whole ordeal. Fast forward to 1993, and this is where things started to go south. Kim was working on a big movie at the time called Boxing Helena, which, if you never heard of that movie before, that's fine. I hadn't either. Apparently, it's a movie about how a surgeon becomes obsessed with some girl and then amputates both of her legs. Seems super weird. Kim also must have thought that this movie concept was weird because she actually signed up to do the movie, but she later pulled out after the funds were already committed, which the producers were not happy about at all. Basically, this movie was banking on her to be the lead actress. It probably wouldn't have even been made at all without her, but the movie did end up getting made, and it went on to completely flop at the box office, presumably because Kim wasn't in it. Like I said, the producers were furious. They sued and they won. The court hit Kim with an $8.9 million judgment. Combine that with the money that she had sunk into Braselton, and suddenly Kim Basinger was broke. She filed for bankruptcy in 1993, meaning Braselton, it was basically worthless. By 1995, the dream of owning a town in Georgia was officially 100% dead. Kim sold her interest in Braselton. The exact amount that Kim got for her shares isn't clear, but the buyer was a developer named Wayne Mason, and unlike Kim, Mason actually had a development team. He had a plan. Over the next couple of decades, Braselton slowly transformed. Today, the city is a pretty normal suburban community with about 13,000 residents. It's got a winery, a resort, some shopping, and a growing population. Seems like a pretty nice place to live, to be honest, but there's definitely no film studio, no cultural mecca. And if you walk through downtown Braselton today, you won't find a trace of the actress who once owned the whole thing. Years later, after Kim Basinger's dream in Braselton fell apart, it did actually go on to inspire the TV show Schitt's Creek. Anybody who's seen the show probably would recognize the similarities. We've got a wealthy celebrity who buys a small town but then loses everything. Schitt's Creek isn't a biography or anything, but the bones are definitely there. And what's cool is that Kim watched the show, and apparently when she found out about the connection, she said it was hilarious, which I agree with her. It was a good show. In a way, the Schitt's Creek inspiration makes for the most Hollywood ending of all. We had a massive personal failure, which got turned into a hit TV show. Kind of a full circle moment. Kim Basinger's story is a fascinating story of ambition. Obviously, it's a pretty sad story too, although I will say that these events didn't completely ruin her career. She continued acting, and she even went on to win an Academy Award for LA Confidential in 1998. It's definitely one of the more bizarre real estate ventures that we've ever seen a celebrity take on, but I gotta say, hats off to Kim for at least giving it a try. I'll see you guys next week.